Recording.
Great. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Richard Linz. I'm an attorney in East Boston, and I represent Crespo Development, Crespo Construction, with respect to the proposed project at 2830 Swan Ave. I'm going to provide a brief presentation, slide deck here, and ask that you hold your questions until the end. We will do the best we can to answer all of your questions. This is the first time we've presented this. So I usually tell people when we present these matters for the first time that we are, we're here to listen and to understand the current concerns and the comments, and then to try to work through those issues as we go through the community process. The Orion Heights Neighborhood Council now holds a separate meeting for design review. And that is my understanding of what tonight's meeting is for. So this is specifically to try to hear feedback about the project. So I'll get started with the presentation. Also with me tonight, I believe we have Ricky and Joshua Crespo. They are the principals of Crespo Development, Crespo Construction. They're East Boston residents and do a number of projects here in the community. Also with me is Eric Zackerson. He is the project architect. He is also very familiar with the community and some of the design that you see throughout the neighborhood have been projects that he's been involved with. So quick overview on the project. We are proposing the development of two separate vacant lots, actually three lots involved. Two of the lots will be combined into one lot, and then the other lot is already a freestanding separately assessed parcel. They're both in excess of about 5,000 square feet. We are proposing the construction of two separate 3-story, 6-unit residential dwellings. Each will have 6 parking spaces. And this is intended for home ownership upon completion. And what that means is these would be individual condominium units. So each of these would be owned separately as individual dwellings. So you can see here the existing conditions is sort of a bird's eye view of the lot here. There's a shed to the rear that would obviously be removed, and then the remaining lot is what we're looking at for purpose of development. Just a different view looking back towards Bennington Street off in the background here. We can see the existing conditions as well as you come down Swan. And then a different view looking back towards the restaurant and the multifamily existing units back this way closest to Belle Isle Marsh. And again, just a different perspective and bird's eye view. And then a street view showing relatively recent existing conditions. This is again looking back towards the multifamilies located here. And then looking back down towards Orion Heights. Just to give yourself a different perspective of the existing conditions here. So the rendering, and I'll let Eric talk a little bit about some of the design elements here, but we call this a context rendering so that you can see what the proposed project would look like in context with the surrounding area. And a couple of things that we're trying to respect here includes heights. So the height of this building is about 31.5 feet. I'll go over that in a little more detail. We do show roof decks at the upper level. We do not show any head houses accessing those roof decks. So these roof decks would be accessed by an internal hatch to help keep the profile of the building a little bit more in line with what we have in the immediate vicinity. And again, just to show it in context with respect to the adjoining parcels. And then so you can see sort of the relationship of the building to the street itself. This is a different view. And again, a couple of things that, and I'll let Eric jump in here quickly. A couple of things they've done is just differentiate the finishes and some of the design. Again, this is very preliminary. So this doesn't necessarily mean this is what the finished product will look like. There will be likely some tweaks and adjustments based on comments that we hear, but this is essentially the first pass. Eric, I don't know if you want to jump in and just talk a little bit about some of the design elements that we're incorporating here and why we chose some of the features that we have.
Sure, thanks, Rich.
as you have said a couple times, we're here to listen and to get feedback on people's impressions of this. The intention is that these two would be treated as kind of the double triple decker, or two 3-unit buildings that happen to be next to each other. In this case, each of these two buildings would have kind of a 3-foot angled bay window on the second and third floor. Unlike a lot of projects, the building is set back off of the sidewalk, kind of to respect the fact that most of the neighboring buildings on the street are set back. So the cantilevers that you see on the second and third floor of the bay windows do stick out, but they stick out well within the property line, and that gives us some space to do some greenery out front and to kind of make it a friendly expression. But we wanted to use those bay windows and the horizontal siding, the contrasting trim, as those are kind of so contextual in the neighborhood, that we wanted to kind of use those even on these forms, which are a little different. And we also really like the idea right now, everybody's big on the idea of open space. And so we wanted to make sure that these had open space. In this case, we have decks for each of the units, and they are a little bit out front of the building, kind of like a front porch, but a little off to the side. And the idea is just to have more connection to the street and the neighborhood. But that's the general idea of the two buildings we're looking at.
Thanks, Eric. We'll come back to you in a moment. So just a quick overview of the lots that are involved. This is the abstract from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. What we're seeing here are, two pretty similar size, what would ultimately be two similar size lots, very typical for the lots in the area. We see generally the width of these lots are about 50 feet wide by 100 feet deep, and that's pretty much repeated throughout the grid here in this section of East Boston. So what we're seeing, that blue line on that lot to the right, is actually two parcels. Those would be combined into one, and the lot on the left is actually already one single parcel. So there is really no subdivision occurring here, even though it looks like from the street this is one lot. These actually will be two separate independent lots and developed accordingly. So what we're showing here is our site plan. 28, this is considered 28 Swan Ave, and we would have access to the rear of the property via common driveway through the middle of the buildings. We are showing a total of 6 parking spaces to the rear, and essentially you have the mirror version of this at 30 Swan on the other side. So just showing sort of the relationship of both to each other. We do have a setback here, which is zoning compliant. The requirement is to have a setback of at least 40 feet. We are setting this back close to about 42 feet. I have the zoning summary in a moment, but the setback would be compliant with what Article 53 of the Boston Zoning Code requires for the depth of our rear yard and to keep our building set back a sufficient amount of depth from the rear property line. Looking at, and I'm only showing, just for purpose of not being repetitive, I'm going to show one of the buildings. Just bear in mind there are 2 of these that we're proposing. What we're showing are the proposed conditions. Each of these, as Eric indicated, are 3-story buildings. They would have 2 units on each level, and essentially these are mirror images of each other. So with the front entryway, and then you have your bedrooms located to the rear, your main living area is located to the front, and then your internal stairwell to get you up to the other levels accordingly. Looking at the level 2 plan, units 3 and 4, and again, this is a little bit larger. This is a 3-bedroom because we do have the ability to make some smaller adjustments as we move up the level. And then units 5 and 6 mirror units 3 and 4 with the same amount of bedrooms. There are exclusive roof decks. Those roof decks, as I said, would be accessed by the internal stairwell and hatch, and they're exclusive to units 5 and unit 6. So the upper level units would have roof decks only. Those roof decks are pushed closer to the front of the building. There is, again, a sufficient setback to the rear We already meet the setback in the rear portion of the property, and therefore would be intending to have these compliant with the setback requirements. So our profile, just our elevation views, and again, not including any head houses for these roof decks. And as you can see, if you can see that close enough, the elevation, tallest point of this building to the roof rafters is 31.5 feet. It's actually 3.5 feet lower than what the height limit requirement is for the district. Just a different view showing the right and left elevations, and again, showing that roof deck pushed closer to the front of the building and set back a pretty good distance from the rear portion of the building. And again, just our proposed conditions is showing the elevations in relationship to Swan Ave and the surrounding context. By way of zoning relief, this is located at 2F 5000 district. Our use is proposed as multifamily, 2 units. Oops, sorry about that. 2 units is the maximum on the lot. So a variance would be necessary in order to have anything more than 2 units. Our lot size, we are proposing about 5,100 to about 5,200 square feet, which is in excess of the minimum lot size that's required under the code. So no relief necessary for that. We do meet the minimum lot width and lot frontage. These are significant because this defines what a buildable lot is in the neighborhood. So a little over 50 feet for both lots and therefore compliant with Article 53. We do require relief on the side yards. We are showing a 4-foot setback. 10 feet is the minimum. Sorry, it keeps doing that. 10 feet is the minimum. So we would be requesting relief for the side yard setback for 6 feet. Our rear yard, as I mentioned, is actually more than 42 feet. It's 44.3 feet is the proposed setback. 40 feet is the requirement and therefore it complies. We would be setting the front of the front property back consistent with the alignment along Swan Ave. We call that a modal setback. However, we will be in compliance with whatever the setback requirement is, so that would also comply. Our floor area ratio is a 1.5, and that is essentially how much square footage we have in relationship, gross square footage we have in relationship to the amount of land that we have. So because we are proposing about 7,700 square feet per building, that would be in excess of the 0.6 that's permitted, and therefore a variance is also necessary. Height, this is somewhat of a misnomer. So 3 stories, 31.5 feet is what we're proposing. The maximum height is 2.5 stories, 35 feet. So although the zoning code permits you to be up to 35 feet, the design is a 2.5 story building. So the height of our building is actually lower than what the zoning code allows, but the design itself actually is a 3-story versus a 2.5 story. So therefore you're required to request relief for that half story. Anytime you propose something more than what's allowed in the district, there is no open space requirement, and that applies here in the 2F 5000 district. So therefore it does comply technically with the zoning code, even though we are providing about 157 square feet per unit of open space, and that doesn't necessarily include all the decks, balconies, and roof decks. Last but not least is parking. We are proposing 6 spaces. That will be 1 space per unit, and that will be included as a what we call an exclusive use parking area for each of the units. So each unit would be assigned 1 parking space in the project. Although the zoning code in this instance would require 8 spaces, we are requesting a variance for the 2 spaces that would be deficient. So that's the summary. We submitted our long form more than last month. We are awaiting our refusal letter that comes from the Inspectional Services Department concerning the zoning relief that would be necessary. Once we receive that, and we anticipate to have that by the middle of September, we'll submit a petition to the Board of Appeal for relief under the Boston zoning code. That's the process that any project that requires a variance must go through. The Board of Appeal is authorized to grant variances in the city of Boston, as any Board of Appeal is for whatever municipality they serve. For those not familiar with the idea of a variance, the variance is essentially an exception under the zoning code. It is provided for in every every community that has zoning, every community in the Commonwealth has a zoning code. And the purpose of a variance is to provide flexibility in a zoning code so that they're not as rigid standards as typically would be applied across the board for any type of development in any community. So in this case, we are asking for variances from those particular provisions that we've just gone over. When it comes to variances, there is a required community process. That's what we're engaged in right now. This is our first presentation because the Oregon Heights Neighborhood Council actually provides for this design review process, I guess. And we will also have an abutters meeting at some point, as well as a vote before the neighborhood association. So that is what we consider to be ongoing right now. Ultimately, we will have a public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeal. Just based on my experience, I anticipate that will probably happen sometime in the winter of 2022, so probably after the new year. It could occur sooner, although I don't believe it will, just based upon the time it's going to take to complete the community process. And those who are within 300 feet of the site should receive a public notice from the city, and that will be mailed to let you know when that hearing will be. Assuming we get our approvals and get the variances that we're requesting, and there's never any guarantee that we will go through a process known as the BPDA design review. BPDA stands for the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and that is the city's planning department that oversees all the development throughout the city. And design review is a condition that is put on any zoning approval in the city that ensures that whatever we're proposing to build meets the requirements that are set forth by the urban design staff and urban design guidelines for the city. That includes things like materials that can be used. You can't build, any new building that's being built in the city of Boston these days cannot use vinyl siding, for example. We showed roof decks, and I think we've outlined those roof decks as being, showing them with balusters and railings. Those are the types of things that the BPDA would look at and perhaps say, they would prefer that we use clear glass or plexiglass to lower the profile. And that's sort of the process that we would go through, assuming we get our approvals before any building permit can issue. Ultimately, when all of this part is completed, we would go for a building permit, and that would likely occur no sooner than spring of 2022. And again, that's just based on the timeline of where things are at right now. And what the anticipated remaining process looks like. Assuming that all goes to plan and that schedule holds up, construction would take about a year to complete. So we would anticipate spring, summer of 23 for these buildings to be completed. So that's our overview. So with that, Tony, I don't know how you want to handle it, but I'm happy to answer any questions or try to answer any questions or punt it over to Eric with respect to any architectural or design questions.
This is Rich, 24 Swan. Can you tell me, are these going to be built on slab or do they have basements?
These are, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe these are slab on grade. I do not believe we're proposing any foundations.
Correct. There would be no basements, just the regular, just the foundation wall.
Okay, a couple other things, sidewalks and curbs or neither?
So, very good question. Swan Ave is a private way. So the Public Improvement Commission does not exercise jurisdiction over private ways. So we will incorporate whatever the BPDA believes to be the appropriate design. Eric has shown some landscaping here. So the buffer between the front property line and the building, we are actually proposing to landscape that. I note that I don't believe there are any sidewalks on that side of Swan Ave. I'm not sure on the other side.
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
There's at least 3 houses with sidewalks on that.
Yeah,
side.
I mean, I suppose no matter what we build here, I suppose, I'm happy to listen to what the neighbors would desire for this. I know that there's, sort of a tricky catch-22 when it comes to private ways. We're happy to acquiesce to whatever it is that the community prefers. So if they want sidewalks, we'll incorporate that. If they want it landscaped, we would landscape it as well. So whatever the neighborhood prefers on that.
Okay, a couple other things. The owner
Yellow, green, blue, purple.
is the owner one person, or is it a multitude of people of the property?
So the project proponent is Crespo Development, Crespo Construction, Crespo Development. Those are two brothers, Josh and Ricky Crespo.
Yeah, but who owns the land, Rich, right
Oh,
now?
they have it under agreement right now. They do not own it at this time. But
Okay.
they have an agreement to purchase it, so they have site control of the location.
I see. Two more things.
Sure.
The parking for the building. Parking on Swan Ave is pretty tight.
Yeah.
And it's great that you'll put 6 spots in the back of each one and 1 per unit, but the average family now probably has 2 or 3 cars. Are we talking about limiting 1 car per unit, or can they have as many cars as they want? They just got to find the place to park them.
Yeah, and sir, this question comes up a lot with any development that we do. So let's assume, for the sake of conversation, we were doing a smaller project, but let me put out there the concept of a rental versus a condo. So if we were to do a smaller project, let's say we did 4-bedroom units to make this a rental project, there really is no limitation on the number of cars that you can have in a particular unit. Well, I guess what you need to look to is, if you have home ownership, meaning condos versus rentals, the likelihood of having, multiple, when I say multiple cars, meaning, in a rental, if you have a roommate situation, you're probably going to have as many cars as you have bedrooms. In a condo situation, we find that, people typically purchase more than what they need. So, a lot of times you have a 2-bedroom that's, people only need a 1-bedroom, or they have, a couple, or married couple that are starting a family and have another bedroom for their child. We find that the impact on cars, or the need for cars, is a lot less in a condo versus rental. I'm not suggesting or saying that people won't have more than 1 car. It's really the program of the building that we're talking about that should minimize that impact a bit.
Yeah, it's just really tight on the street, Rich.
Yeah.
When someone parks in front of someone else's house on this street, it's not a nice thing.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden you've got 12 more cars in there than you need, now they're going to have to figure out where to park, and that is likely going to cause a pretty cause a lot of friction in the neighborhood, especially when the snow comes.
Yeah. So, I know that when Ricky and Josh started undertaking the design of this, it was critical, and they expressed to the architect, critical to make sure there's at least 1 parking space per unit, and that it's done off street, meaning off of Swan Ave.
Yeah.
And again, I want to be transparent and clear. If people come to visit, whether they're visiting this property or somebody else's property, you have visitor parking issues. I get all that. What we're trying to do is, figure out what works best in the marketplace. And right now we're finding one space per unit, seems to be the sweet spot on a condo project. And we feel that, while everybody, I can't guarantee everybody won't have more than 1 car. I can also assure you, and I'm not, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but our proximity to Suffolk Downs train station, makes this an attractive location for a carless household. And I'm not saying, we will guarantee that people live here and won't have a car. But what that does is that does create an opportunity that when you have, especially in a condo association, and we always include in our condo docs the ability to have other unit owners permit other, essentially they can rent to another unit owner in the building. They can't rent to anybody else. They can only rent to others in the building. So,
Yeah.
so if unit one, purchases the unit and they don't have a car because they want to be near the train station and they like the fact of having a car, which, is a possibility and not uncommon, they could easily rent their space to another unit owner to allow for, for them to have multiple vehicles. That's a pretty common approach. And we see that, definitely closer to public transit, and especially this at a location like this within, short walking distance to a T station gives us that opportunity. And again,
Yeah.
I before anybody criticizes me, I'm not guaranteeing that's the way it's going to work, but in theory, when you have home ownership versus rental, your parking demand is a bit less than what it would be, if you had 4 roommates living in a 4-bedroom apartment versus, a young couple with a starting family. Chances
Yeah.
are you're going to have less. So that's one of the reasons why we're proposing this to be condo.
Yeah, but the other piece though is that you have no guest parking places. So, I don't care if it's a visiting nurse coming by or whether it's a kid's birthday party. You're going to be pissing off a lot of people in the neighborhood when you're parking all over their property. As you said, this is a private way and people treat areas in front of their house very different than other parts of the city.
Yeah, understood. And I think we want to obviously be respectful of that as well. And, I know as a private way, it's unlike a public street, people parking in front of their own property, there's a sort of I guess I would say, for lack of a better term, there's an unwritten rule that's their parking spot. They park in front of their home. And, I think we can certainly try to figure out, ways to try to address that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just see that as a pretty tough sticking point there.
Yeah, understood.
I mean, you solve it if there was a way to say one unit, for every unit, it's 1 car, period. Live
Yeah.
with it. Don't
Yeah.
buy it unless you can have
Understood.
live with 1 car.
Yep, I understand. So I'm just looking at some of the chat questions. I do see a question, how many bedrooms per unit? So the lower level is 2 bedrooms and the upper levels are 3 bedrooms. And I see a comment from Evelyn at 1225, the 6 units, 2 bedrooms each. They can barely fit 2 cars back there. I didn't permit that project, but I'm familiar with it. I think the depth of the building at 1225 goes closer to the rear property line than what we're proposing. And that's why we can fit 6 cars. We're not, again, we've got about 43 feet between the back of our building and the back property line. I don't think that's the case at 1225. I think they go further back. And I think it's a little bit of a larger building as well. That's a 4-story building. We're only proposing 3. So we do have a little bit less dense than the one at 1225. Let me just jump through here. Just a couple more questions. It's not unwritten, it's their property. Well, private ways are interesting. Everybody who owns property in a private way owns rights in the private way. There is no deeded, ownership rights in front of your property. You own to the halfway point in common with all other owners on the private way. So everybody has the same rights in a private way. Let's see.
So if somebody parks in front of my house on a private way, since I own to the middle of the street, and it's my responsibility to have that paved, then if somebody parks on my side of the street, if somebody parks in front of my home, then they're on my property. They're on private property.
I don't want, is that Ms. O'Brien that was just speaking?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not as easy, cut and dry, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline on it. It's a little more complex than that in private ways, and it has to do with title to real estate. The theory of people owning out to the midway point is more or less the theory in the sense that everybody owns out to the midway point, meaning everybody in the private way shares in the ownership of the private way itself. But to the extent that there's any exclusive space that's designated, when you say it's your property line ends at the front property line. You, in common with all others, own to the midway point of the private way. And the reason that that's stated that way is that so you can share not so much ownership, but responsibility. And that's really what comes down to. And I'm happy to have a conversation in private ways with you, but I understand the concern, and I'm certainly going to talk to my client about trying to work on what that solution looks like, especially in the condominium documents. I'm sure we can come up with something that, you know, reasonably satisfies neighbors with respect to that concern. So I'm happy to explore that more, and I'm glad we're having this conversation about this.
I can look out my window and see the 6-family. They tore down a ranch with a driveway and put a 6-family on Bennington Street. I can see it from my window. And it's the same proposal that you have here, 3 levels with access to the roof, and which is really 4 levels, because now they have this wooden structure on both sides of the roof.
Right.
Now you're really talking about a 4-story building rather than a 3-story
Yeah, I
building.
don't, this is for all intents and purposes, this is a 3-story building. But the roof deck, the fact that the roof deck is below the height limit, and it's not considered a story under the zoning code. What we're showing is, just so we can illustrate it, we're showing it with balusters. I believe in the next iteration, we can show this with the clear panels. It's actually very low profile. You barely would see any of these railings that are being shown. We're showing it so you can see where the relationship of the roof deck is to the building. This is a 3-story building. The roof decks are not counted as a story.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Sure. I just wanted to try to respond to a couple more of the comments. So let me just run through these, and then we can jump back. So hold on one second. The question was to the units on level 1 and 2 of the outside space, other than the parking spot. Yes, they do have balconies, and that is considered part of the outdoor space. Yeah. 24 feet. Yep, I understand on the 4-foot setback. So one of the things we can look at is moving the building a little bit closer to the middle, just to ensure that we're able to still meet the access for the driveway, because that's gonna be a shared driveway. So we'll work on that. Okay, so I'm sorry, DVC, is it
Yep.
DVC?
Donna,
Yep.
22 Swan Ave.
Yep.
Couple of questions. and
Sure.
Comment. First of all, I don't agree with the design of the building. If you look at the neighborhood, this looks very commercial. I would say take it down a floor. No, that's probably not going to be possible. Like the townhouses next to it, can't you build 2 or 3 of those in the lot? That would fit in with the neighborhood, with the
Sure.
fabric of the neighborhood. These units do not look like a neighborhood setting, number 1. Number 2, we just had a meeting over at the casket company. They're proposing 221 units there. Across from there in the automotive center, they're proposing 40 units there. Then they're proposing, Crespo's trying to get units behind us on Bennington Street. We are just being overpowered by these units. You are losing the neighborhoods of Boston. Now, the other thing is the casket company burnt down because we're at the end of the water line. When they opened the hydrants, there was no water pressure. Now, I know they just redid all the water pipes, but no one can answer the question, will they have enough water pressure with 220 at the casket company? You want these here, the ones at Manny's Automotive Center. We need the fire department to come down and speak to us and guarantee us that they will have water and water pressure in the event of an emergency.
The pressure is marginal right now.
Let me respond to that. So with any building permit in the city of Boston, it's not just, the building permit to put the building up. There are a whole host of other agencies that have to review the permit application. And both of those agencies, the Boston Fire Department and the Boston Water and Sewer. Boston Water and Sewer has to issue an approval on a water and sewer design plan. And that includes ensuring that there's adequate water pressure coming into the building for not only, the public water supply for the building, but also in this case, for any other needs that require access to the water from the city service. That's where Boston Fire comes in. Both of these buildings will have to be fully sprinkled. And in order to do that, there has to be adequate pressure coming into the building for a sprinkler system. And one of the reasons, one of the ways that they address that before any building permit can be issued, is they have to do a flow test for these buildings to ensure the pressure is adequate for life safety. If the water pressure is not adequate, we don't get a building permit. It's that simple. It's very, very straightforward. So I fully understand the concern you're raising, but that's not something that hasn't been thought of, and certainly hasn't been thought of by the city of Boston, in the way that they approach building permits. So I can assure you that any building permit that issues for this property will have taken those issues into consideration, and that would have been reviewed by 2 other agencies beyond inspectional services before a building permit issues.
Another question. This is a condo community. In the condo docs, will it specify that no one person can purchase more than 1 unit or 2 units? And also, where you have all the 12 units, are you going to specify that only 1 could be rented out or none could be rented out? How is that going to work?
That's a good question. So typically on the projects that the Crespos are involved in, we have a standard condominium document with rules and regulations to ensure the maximization of home ownership and owner occupancy. And the reason we do that is for a couple of different reasons, not the least of which is the marketability of the units. Conventional financing, when you go to a bank and get a loan, if you're an owner occupant in a building, it's easier to get a loan for a condo than if you're an investor or in a building like this. For example, if this were considered one, each one of these would consider one condo association, typically they want to see at least more than 50% of the building owner occupied. And again, it goes to being able to sell the units and market the units. So in order to accomplish that, we put very specific language in our condominium documents that say that this is intended obviously to be for home ownership. There are strict rules on rental. There's no short-term rentals. There's actually no short-term rentals anyway for these types of buildings, especially a condo building. But any lease for the building has to be for at least a year, has to be in writing. And for the most part, it ensures that anybody who even rents in this building, assuming that was even going to happen, has to follow the same rules and regulations as anybody else who lives here as a unit owner. But I can tell you that chances are these, based upon where the market is today, these do not present themselves very well for rental, especially if the whole building's a condo. The market is just in a place right now where new construction condominiums, the cost, what those will cost in the marketplace are probably not a very good bargain for investment properties. So an investor does not look at a building like this if they're looking for a rental portfolio to, sort of increase their rental inventory because the cost is too much. Other buildings that are condos that are, maybe rehabs or longer standing condominiums that, don't necessarily involve new construction present a much better opportunity for investors. This does not because it's new construction. So just the way the pattern goes, the way the market goes, these are very highly likely to be all owner occupied buildings based upon just the way the market works and the cost per square foot to purchase one. There's not a good if rental, if that answers your question.
Okay, and one last question.
Sure.
when they build these units, if they build these units, now we're going to have all kinds of trucks and equipment down this street. This street can't handle it, as you know. It's all patched. Now we're going to be in a worse position than we're in now. So there has to be some sort of concession where the builder will pave all of Swan Ave.
You're asking the builder to pave Swan Ave?
Well, if he's going to have his trucks down here for a year, he's going to rip up all the tar. We only have tar. We don't.
If he, yeah, if he ruins it, he should pave it.
Yeah, if he ruins it, he should pave it. We just put up with the ones with the Ruggierios over there. And by the way, with their rooftop decks, I can hear every word they say. So I'm going to have a word with Joe about that. I'm sure they don't realize that. Now with these rooftop decks, do you think any of us is going to be able to hear our TVs if people are out there? Sound carries.
Yeah. Well, roof deck or a backyard, it's, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's really, it's a matter of, where the outdoor space is located. But I certainly will look into, any questions regarding paving. I don't know that we're going to pick up the paving of the entire street. But, certainly, if there's impact to the, to the area where our buildings are, then certainly we'll look at that.
Well, what about coming in? He's got to come in on Leverett Ave with his heavy equipment and park them all down the street.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that there's a lot outside of, when you say heavy equipment, an excavator we're not putting full foundations in this property. So an excavator, a standard, backhoe excavator is probably the extent of the heaviest equipment we have.
Mhm.
When they bring in cement to pour the foundation, that's it's probably a 1-day operation with the cement mixer. That's probably it for heavy equipment. These are going to be stick built. These aren't being modular, so we're not going to have a crane coming in, putting these up. These are going to be all stick built on site.
Yeah, but you're still going to have trucks down here. We have to be very careful. There's a school bus that used to park down the end of the street just to take a break with no children in the neighborhood. But he
Well, and
went down
it's a fire
the
zone
street.
too.
It's crazy. So, we're going to have to talk about this a little bit more.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the comments.
We did have some questions that popped up in the chat, asking about the square footage per unit.
Eric, do you have that offhand?
I do not have it offhand. Let me see if I can figure it out.
I mean, these look like they're probably about 1,000 square feet, maybe a little bit plus or minus.
Yeah, a little over.
Yeah. And that's a typical size for a unit like this. These wouldn't be considered, these are considered standard size condo units for the bedroom count that we have. They're not micro units, and they're not, extensively large units.
We have another question that's centered around that buying the condo and then renting it. Gail Miller said, we have seen that developers often flip rent to condo to rentals. Where is that guarantee in writing?
Where do you see that, Gail? Can I have an example of that, Gail?
You should be able to unmute.
No, nothing comes to mind, but I know I've been at meetings where that has happened. So, I mean, I don't think that's a big secret.
Well, I mean, it'd be incredibly helpful if you can give me an example.
Richie, I've been to,
if it's anecdotal, I don't know how to answer that.
well, it is anecdotal because how many meetings do we go to? I can hardly remember yesterday. So I can't.
I can tell you, Gail, to be honest with you, Gail, I mean, I only know of it going the other way, rental to condo, not condo to rental.
Well, regardless, it can go both ways. However, where is going to be the guarantee is the question.
So So I don't know if I understand your question. You're looking for us to give you a guarantee that these will be condos.
Yeah, if you're
Okay.
proposing condos.
Yeah, is that a condition of support? So
No,
this is,
no, it has nothing
okay,
to
all
do
right,
with support.
then I don't understand your question then.
The question is simple, Rich. Is there a guarantee that your proposal is for condos? The
And
question is.
my question to you is if you want us to give you that guarantee, which really I don't know how to guarantee that other than, you know, the type of design that we're proposing and the type of developer that's involved, their typical portfolio is not a hold, it's not rental, it's condo. So these are being designed as home ownership units. And that's the program. That's what we're looking to do. If you wanted us to guarantee it, give me an idea how you would like us to do that. What's the guarantee? What do you want us to do?
That they'll only be condos.
Sure.
That's,
Yeah.
that's, that's simple.
Okay. Yeah, that's easy enough.
I mean, that's what the abutters are apparently concerned about.
Yeah, if I know, and you're not an abutter, so I'm happy to do, if the abutters themselves would like to have some sort of understanding on how these remain condos, I'm happy to work it out with the abutters.
Fine, that's fine.
Nicole O'Brien was asking, what are the benefits for the neighborhood?
I mean, for general benefit, you know, at any time you're adding housing to a neighborhood, you know, that's a larger benefit. I know that that's probably debatable to people in the immediate vicinity, but you know, as the city continues to grow and demand continues to rise, you know, the only way to address the housing issues that, you know, people seem to be concerned with is to add housing. And that's, you know, that's the global benefit here is adding additional housing units to, you know, to satisfy the demand that's ongoing here in the community.
Who's the demand by?
Demand by people who want to live in the community.
People are living in the community, and we feel it's too dense and getting denser.
You asked me.
This is Larry Zola,
Yeah.
18 Swan
Yeah.
Avenue.
No,
We're already under distress from Crespo on 1209 Bennington. They backed out of the ZBA meeting.
Nobody bagged out. What do you mean they bagged out? What's that mean? I don't know what you mean by that.
They were supposed to present. And they said, nah, not today. Let's do it another day. Okay.
Because the makeup of the board was probably not a full 7-member board.
No. So listen, Rich, we've got a nice neighborhood here, and they're trying to throw a lot of people in with us, with structures that don't match the neighborhood. They aren't the owners. They won't be the owners on either project in our neighborhood until they get their variances. Why should we help the Crespo team make a lot of bucks? The picture that you presented of the surrounding property is out of date.
Sir, I don't think anybody's asking you to help the Crespos make a lot of bucks. I think what we're here to talk about, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a presentation of the project, and my understanding of the design review committee is to talk about the design and the building that we're proposing.
The design doesn't
I know, but
fit
it sounds to me.
locale.
It sounds to me like we're talking about global issues of development in the community in general. And I understand that that's always a concern, but my understanding of tonight is to talk about what the issues with the design. Now, we did hear some things about parking. We did hear some things about the design itself, meaning it doesn't reflect some of the architecture we see in the neighborhood. Those are good points that we can certainly take back. But, you know, the commentary about, you know, making the Crespos money, that's not, I don't think that's what a design review meeting is supposed to be. Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we need to have a little more focused discussion on the design issues. That's what I understood tonight's meeting to be.
You're coming in, you're disrupting, you're asking to put a big structure in, you know, something that looks like a storage unit. Okay. Why not put up a decent looking single-family home, maybe with an in-law apartment, or like the one right next door to it, the one that has a foundation and probably regrets it. So let's get some clarification. Is it a half foundation or is it just a slab there? Because the water table around here is terrible.
Well, so that's
And
great.
new
That's
digging,
that's a good design question. So design question, slab on grade design is, a full foundation has to get down, 7-8 feet into the ground with a footing. This is limited to the footing only. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, which only requires a slight amount of excavation from the site. And then the footings get added to the site with the slab over the top of it. I don't think there's any significant excavation that has to occur on the site.
That's correct. We'd just dig down the 4 feet for the frost wall and then backfill it.
Now the roof decks there. I mean, really. All we can think about is, yeah, that's going to be Party City and an accident waiting to happen. How come in East Boston, all these new developments, nobody's going solar?
Nobody's what? I'm sorry?
Going solar.
So we actually have some space to put solar on the back of the roof. That's not something that we've completely ruled out. And based upon some of the, yeah, some of the requirements for energy efficiency, we could certainly look at solar. So we're not saying it's not, it's just a little early in the process to talk about that.
But we're not a place that wants to be observed daily by people lounging on their roof deck.
Sure. So let me ask a question. So removal of the roof deck is something that would be a positive step in the right direction. And again, talking about design, we're focusing on the design here. So
Yes.
you're saying the roof deck, elimination of the roof deck is something that would
Yes,
be a step in the right direction. Okay.
yes.
City's starting to look sick with all those things.
Yeah.
Will there be a management company managing these buildings?
Yes, professionally managed condo association.
Okay, and they'll be responsible for the trash removal, snow
Correct.
removal?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So another common thing that's going on here that you see throughout East Boston is somebody renovates, they make some very nice looking balconies like you see there with the windows. You can put a chair out. And then somebody comes along and throws another building up in front of you. Great, great.
Okay.
We have a couple people that have had their hands raised. Nicole O'Brien and Joanne Mahoney. I'm not sure if you still had comments to make.
Yes, I do. So everybody keeps saying that we need more housing, that the city of East Boston needs more housing. I just want to bring up a few things. That Donna brought up the casket company, 241 units. Next door to that has been approved 42 units at the gas station there, or the car garage. Rapino's up the heights is now 40 plus units. The Suffolk Downs is going to be a mini city in its own. We have on Waldemar, just behind Bennington Street across from us, they just put 40 plus units. Then Addison Street has what, 200 units, someone said? Over 200 units, maybe even more. On Saratoga Street, right after Curtis Street, they're building 4-story, looks like it could be over 100 units. Plus, if you go down on, what is it, near not Pierce Park, but near the park near the train station. I can't think of the name of the street.
Oh, Preston.
Yes, so they have all those new units there. They were on Boardman Street. They took, on Bennington Street, they just took a single garage and now built 4 units. On Boardman Street, they took 2 3 families and now made it a 9-family or 9 units. Down near the hotel on that same street, there was an empty lot and now they're making that either 3 or 4 units.
Ms. O'Brien,
Next-
I'm, believe me, I'm well aware of all the development. I guess I
Well,
want to
you-
really.
well, You just said,
I-
you
but I want-
just said that we need more housing. How much
I
housing? Are we
I'm
taking
sorry,
everybody from the
Ms.
hood?
O'Brien, I didn't say we need more housing. The question to me was, why are we developing these sites? Why are we adding houses? That was the question. The question was why do we need this housing? And my answer is because there's a demand to live in the neighborhood. And when you have a demand, you don't satisfy the supply, then what you're doing is essentially creating the housing crunch that a lot of people do complain about, and that is the cost to live in the city. And if you don't satisfy the demand, then you have a supply shortage, and that's essentially what we're talking about. I didn't say, I never said that. I never said we need more housing. That's the economics of development. When you have people who want to live in a neighborhood and you don't have a supply of housing to satisfy that, you drive your prices up, you drive your cost of living up, and all of those issues that go along with that. That's what I said. I guess I know we have other questions. I know we have another meeting as well. I want to make sure that we get to other people's comments, and I'm not trying to dismiss it. I fully appreciate. I hear it every week. Trust me. Nobody hears it more than me about the development in East Boston. I guess what I want to be focused on is this particular project and what else we can talk about when it comes to design and features and things that go along with that. Not the global development issues in East Boston.
Okay, so
The
as an
houses on
abutter,
either
as someone
side.
who lives on Swan Ave, having it instead of 2 6-families, what would satisfy our home would be having 2 2-families.
Thank you.
Aye.
There was a question regarding runoff, and I want to make sure we talk about that because Jane makes a good point and says that right now it's absorbed into the open ground, and any plans to deal with that. So that's a actually great question, because if we look at the site now, we have a good deal of, let me just jump back here real quick. There we go. So what you have here is a good amount of pervious ground, which absorbs rainwater and any runoff probably from the houses that are both left and right and rear of this property. Fortunately for this particular type of site, anytime you do new construction, the city requires, I mentioned previously about the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, the city requires that you demonstrate the ability to handle on-site all stormwater management and runoff. So you can't just run downspouts out into the street and let the water just run off. In fact, you have to put a system in your property to handle all of the groundwater and to release it into the city system over a period of time, as opposed to just letting it run right out into the sewer. The conditions that we will incorporate into any construction on this site will actually be better than the absorption and the stormwater management that exists today, and that is required under both DEP requirements and the Boston Water and Sewer regulations. So any construction in the city of Boston has to have that incorporated into its design, and especially on buildings of this size. So we will have that built into this site as part of any construction.
It's a few minutes after 7 now. I know we have a lot of feedback to be addressed. Would you like to come back to our October design review meeting, Rich, with this?
No,
proposal?
I guess, Tony, and I'm a little unclear as to what this process entails. So I know we're doing a design review component, but I guess, and I asked this question when you first started, it's like, what is the procedure for design review? I mean, do I just keep coming back until you say that you're satisfied, or are we, moving the project along? Because, we have a time window now because we filed with ISD, and we're getting a lot of pressure these days from ISD that, if we have permit applications pending and they're not acted upon within a certain period of time, they're abandoning those permits, and that's part of the pressure that we're having with the community process. So while I'm happy to engage in the subcommittee process, I just need to have some understanding of what that process entails and what is the next step? How do we move this to the next step?
It would be basically the same as like in a butters meeting. We try and make sure that abutters are able to attend this and have their voices heard here in addition to the abutters meeting, but we'd like to see a lot of the questions that we had addressed. It's not going to be like an infinite loop where there's like one thing and we just never let you go to a vote, because that's just not feasible. But we do like to see that you've addressed the abutters concerns, and then even if you were to come back in October on the 7th, if everyone says, yep, we can move forward with this, we don't like this one parking thing, but if you want to go to a vote now the way it is, we can even schedule that for the October meeting.
Understood. Yeah, that works. And I do see a comment from Gail about Jeffrey's Point has no limit. That's actually not true, Gail. Jeffrey's Point has a limit. What they do is they actually identify the issues and they ask you to return if there are outstanding issues to a subsequent meeting. And those are the only issues that are discussed at that subsequent meeting. It's not sort of a reopening of the whole process again. So, if we want to narrow down what the specific issues are, Tony, I'm happy to come back in October and work to address them, or say we couldn't address them, but I think we need to sort of pare down what the specifics are that you want me to address in October, and I'm happy to do that. And we can work with our team to try to come up with some answers or some adjustments on the project to try to address those concerns. So if we want to get me a bullet list of the items that we are being asked to look at, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because there were a lot of issues brought up by the abutters as well as design review committee members such as myself. You talked about, oh, well, the roof deck, if that's eliminated, is that okay? These are the types of things,
Sure.
this is where this conversation is going, Rich.
Good.
And
Yep.
that's what Tony is asking you to
Yep.
come back with in October. So, to ask what the purpose is or what the definition is of design review is really not warranted here.
No, Joanne,
because we are, don't argue, please.
I'm not arguing.
Listen,
I want to say to you,
But
don't misunderstand what I'm saying.
What we're doing here is having a discussion of this proposal, and we're giving our feedback.
I understand that.
Both as a design review committee and, more importantly, the abutters.
I fully understand that.
All righty.
What I'm expressing, Joanne, is what I'm saying
We'll
is
get a
that
list to
there's
you. We'll get a list to you. I'm not here to debate with you.
I'm not debating. I'm telling you, I'm explaining my position. Explaining my position is not debating, Joanne.
All right,
So
wonderful.
at least let me say my side of the story. I'm being asked to come into a design review committee meeting that has no parameters and no rules. And I fully understand what you're saying about this is an opportunity to discuss these issues. What I'm saying is there can't be an infinite loop of just keep coming back until we're satisfied. If there are specific issues, I think it's fair for me to ask, what are those issues and what do you want me to address? And I'm happy to come back and spend the time doing that on saying, okay, you asked us about the roof deck, here's what we did. You asked us about parking,
Right.
here's what we did.
Exactly.
I'm happy to do all that. I'm not debating you. What I'm saying is I'm just unclear as to what that process looks like. And I'm just asking for clarification on it, which I think, is appropriate considering this process.
Mhm. Yep.
Great,
Yeah, well, thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
We'll get that organized and sent over to you, along with whatever feedback we have for our next presentation, which is 116 Waldemar.
Bear with me 1 second.
Of course.
And just for the record, asking about what the process is not being argumentative. I'm simply trying to understand on behalf of my client what the process looks like. So thank you for the clarification. Okay, let's see. Are we able to see that?
Yep.
Great, thank you, Tony. And again, for the record, my name is Richard Linz. I am an attorney here in East Boston. Tonight, I am representing the property owner, Jean McCadden. She is the property owner at 116 Waldemar Avenue. And this is, again, our initial presentation. We are presenting this to the subcommittee in order for to obtain feedback on design and issues that go along with this particular proposal. I believe, if there are abutters and members of the neighborhood who are present, there was a previous proposal at this site. That project did not move forward. And one of the reasons Jean is involved is because she feels it was important for her to have a little bit more oversight into the way this project would move forward. So Jean is the project proponent here, and she is also working with Context Workshop. Eric Zackerson is our project architect, and we will give a similar presentation and ask that we hold any questions until the end. So let's jump right into it. So we are looking to combine 2 lots and demolish an existing structure. We are proposing the construction of a new 12-unit residential dwelling. We would include 14 garage parking spaces, so a little over 1 space per unit. These would range in size from approximately 900 to about 1,100 square feet. Because of the number of units we're proposing is in excess of 10, we are proposing that 2 of the units, which is 14%, will be set aside under the City of Boston we call the IDP, which stands for Inclusionary Development Policy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the discussion. This too is intended for home ownership. So these would be condominiums, and again, managed by a condominium management company. So bird's eye view, located directly across from the Suffolk Downs parking lot. Just getting a view looking up Waldemar towards McClellan Highway. You can see the existing structure here and the adjoining lot located immediately on the other side. Different bird's eye view looking back with Faywood Ave in the rear, Waldemar Ave located closer to the bottom of the screen, and then just another bird's eye view to give perspective with respect to the building located directly behind. So our street view is here. Existing structure is set up a bit higher than the sidewalk, so the grade of this building sort of incorporates some of the slope of the hill. As we come down from Faywood to Waldemar, there is a grade separation. So the buildings along Faywood that are located directly behind this site are actually at a higher elevation than our building, which is lower. Just a different view here of the vacant lot that is being combined with the lot immediately adjacent. And then a different view looking down Waldemar, and again, the parking lot located directly across the street from the site. So our rendering, and this is a first pass at this project, we are showing this to try to capture a few of the elements that we typically see in the neighborhood. And I'm going to ask Eric to jump in a little bit to talk about some of the ideas that went into coming up with this design. One of the things that we sort of looked at, and I know Eric spent a good deal of time walking the neighborhood and getting an idea of what the feel was for some of the structures in and around the area, was to try to take advantage of some of this grade. And that's how we're able to incorporate the garage at the lower level, and then sort of incorporate the living space above that, and have this design sort of feel as if it's not one massive box, but sort of several smaller buildings that are incorporated into the site. So Eric, if you want to talk a little bit about how we came up with this and sort of what Jean's vision was for the site.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, I think that you alluded to it correctly. We spent a lot of time looking at the different, somewhat eclectic buildings of Waldemar, and recognize that the majority of them, or almost none of them, present themselves as big. And so we wanted to try and keep it to a 3-story expression as much as possible. And we wanted to make sure that there was ample parking on the site, but that it didn't look like it was a large lot. And the sloping of the site kind of helped us do that. So we bury a first level that is a single residential unit and 14 parking spaces on that first floor. And then we set up the upper floor as a couple of volumes with some varied roof lines. And we tried to match some of the angles and some of the roof lines from the adjacent properties. Some of them are square and a lot of them have presented with a gable or with the dormers. And so we wanted to give it some interest up at the top and try and keep it from feeling as much as it's a big box as some of these larger scale developments kind of end up when they're designed. And then on top of that, we wanted to put some detail on here, but we also noticed that this was not a super detail heavy stretch of the street. And I wanted to kind of get some feedback on that. We wanted to talk about the fact that, I think as Rich is indicating, we are pushed 15 feet back from the sidewalk in this situation, because that's what the street feels like. It feels like most of the buildings are pushed back. A lot of them have kind of stairs or walkways that kind of wind up there. And we wanted to present it as a building set into the hill. And a little bit back from the street, so that we'd have a nice green lush front yard.
Thank you, Eric. So zoning district is a 1F 4,000 district. And I'm sure as everybody is familiar, the surrounding sort of bookends of this neighborhood, you have the Orient Heights development a little bit further up the street, and of course Suffolk Downs located directly across the street. What we're looking at here is about 100 feet of frontage with the two lots combined, and just under 100 feet in depth to the rear of the lot. What we do see here is a pathway or easement in between the next lot, which is beyond the passageway. So we are not abutting directly onto the next adjoining lot to our left. Real quickly, and I incorporate this anytime there is a proposal to demolish an existing structure. This is what we call the MACRIS abstract, Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System. Anybody can go on and research any property in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to understand if there is any historical significance for a particular property. And this will have to go through what we call an Article 85 process. Article 85 says any building in the city of Boston that is over 50 years old or has been designated as significant must have a hearing before it's torn down. And there's a determination as to whether or not there's a delay in any demolition of the building. And usually the first thing we do is we stop by the MACRIS database and MACRIS abstracts and determine whether or not there is any details or information that would suggest that this building has some historical significance. As you can see down here, no results found is the response that typically is given when there are no records suggesting that there's any historical significance. What we would be looking for is something from the Mass Historic Commission or the Boston Landmarks Commission by way of an inventory. And the inventory would suggest that somehow this has been looked at and determined to have whether it was architectural or some type of historical significance. So short answer here is when there's no results found, there's a strong likelihood that there is no significance and that there would be no delay once a demolition permit were to issue to tear the building down. So I just want to highlight that, because anytime we are involved with a demolition, we want to make sure that we're researching the historical background of the property. I include this for reference just because I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. But this is the overlay for the Suffolk Downs property showing the heights that have been approved under the zoning amendment for the PDA for Suffolk Downs. And as you can see here, as you get the upper level of Waldemar Ave, you're at about 85-foot height limit. It drops down to about 40 feet as we get closer to our location, all the way down to the end as you get closer to Wally and intersection of Wally and Waldemar. And then of course, 70 feet immediately behind that for most of that earlier part of Waldemar Ave. So here's our existing site plan, again, showing both lots. Combined lot size is 9,100, a little over 9,100 square feet. And the existing structure here at 116 that would be demolished. We do show our layout, and again, this is preliminary, and this is based upon just sort of studying the site and trying to determine how we are going to situate the property and how we're going to fit it onto the site. But you can see here essentially the layout, and I'll show you a little bit more when we get to the plan as to how it will relate to the property. You saw in the rendering that we did have the driveway coming in, and these are the parking spaces that are being proposed. Several of these are considered tandem spots, so 4 of them here are the tandem spots, and then you have your other spots located throughout the rest of the garage. These are a mix of compact spaces. That means they're about 7 feet in width, and then full-size spaces, which are about 8.5 feet in width. And that is something that the zoning code permits. We also have some bike storage as well for building this size. And you see here on the lower ground level, unit 1, which has about 1,130 square feet. Unit 1 is located at the ground level, and there's sort of a dual purpose for this. One, it keeps activation at the lower level, so you don't just have a garage at the ground level, but it also serves as the handicap adaptable unit, so that in the event a person with disabilities required living space in a building like this, this unit is actually easily adaptable to accommodate persons with disabilities, and there's no need for an elevator in the building. So as we move up to the first full level, we just got a mix of layout for units and different varying sizes and dimensions and setups and program. But you can see here how the building actually pulls in from the garage itself. So even though our garage does fit out a good portion of the site, the building itself actually sets back from the side property lines as shown here. You can see the outline of the garage below. As we move up the building, again, a very similar pattern for the unit layout. And we do show some decks off of each of the units to provide some additional outdoor space as we go up. And then we get up to the level 3 plan. We do show the roof below, and again, this is pulling back some of the building itself, and we could review that again in the elevations to show how we are sort of softening the building as we get up closer to the top. And you saw that pitched roof that Eric talked about will, certainly carry some of the character that we do see in and around the area. So Eric, if you want to talk a little bit about what we're looking at here for section and elevation, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think this is the part that was kind of, at least initially, the hardest for us to visualize and get our mind around, is that by the time you get to the back of the site, there's at least a full level of building below grade. So while on the front it's completely walkout, in the back on the second floor, some of those windows will actually already be in window wells, almost as if they were basement units. So we wanted to try and make sure that the windows faced as much to the front and the sides. And that's kind of highlighted by the dark line you see here. So the parking in that first floor unit, they're above grade in the front, but when you get even a few feet into the lot, they start to be completely buried.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that we want to highlight here, Eric, is that even though we're calling out a height pitch to the roof at 45 feet, it actually is less than that from the natural grade of the property, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If for zoning purposes, we usually calculate it from the sidewalk, although in reality, this is such a steep site that you would calculate it differently. But I didn't want to show it different from the way that people in these neighborhood meetings are used to seeing it. So these are all calculated off the sidewalk, but from a zoning and from a building code standpoint, this is going to be much less than 41 feet.
Got it. Thank you. So if you talk a little bit about these elevations. So we're showing here just the actual 1-dimension and 3-dimensional elevations of the building as well. And again, trying to carry back some of that pitched roof as opposed to making this, just all sort of one flat roof design. And you can see how the elevation itself rising up towards Faywood Ave, sort of encompasses the entire garage level. So that garage level actually gets tucked into the hill for the most part, and the building itself is above that. This is a good view of the elevation change from the back of the property down to the front. And again, encompassing most of that garage and showing what the exposed portion of the property looks like. And this would be the right view. And again, showing the grade separation, the grade change. And as Eric said, the building itself being measured from the sidewalk is at 45. But if you look at it from the average grade of the property itself, somewhere probably in this area here, you're probably about 10 feet less than what the actual site would be. And looking at from the rear, so this would be the Faywood Ave perspective, you're actually, again, it's 45 feet to the sidewalk at Waldemar, but because the grade itself here is probably about a 20-foot difference, the exposed portion of the building in the back is only about 20 feet. So again, there's our proposed conditions and talking about the relief that would be necessary. The proposed use of multifamily, 1 unit per lot would be allowed. So because there are 2 lots, we would actually have multi-units be allowed, but a multifamily on 1 lot combined requires a variance. We do meet the minimum lot size. We do meet the minimum lot width and frontage. We also meet the side yard at 1 foot. I'm sorry, we require relief in the side yard on 1 foot on the left and 3.5 feet on the right. 10 foot is the minimum. I would point out on the left-hand side, we can meet the code because there is that private way in between us and the adjoining property. Our front yard would also be a modal setback. I don't, for some reason, rear yard is not included on here. A 40-foot setback is required in the rear yard. When you consider the location of the actual garage and the extent of the garage that we have, we're actually within 5 feet of the rear property line, but that is subgrade. But we would have to count that because this portion of our structure would be within the setback. So we do require a variance for rear yard as well. Our foot area ratio is a 1.58. 0.5 is the maximum. So again, a variance would be necessary. The maximum height, we are proposing this would be considered a 3-story building. 45.1 when you measure it from the sidewalk, obviously less than that from what is actually visible. 2.5-story, 35 feet is the max when it comes to what's allowed in the district. Similar to the last proposal, because we do not have an allowed use and the use requires a variance, there is no open space requirement. So therefore no relief would be necessary for open space. And last but not least, we are providing 14 parking spaces. The code calculates a total of 24 spaces based on the number of units we have. There are some adjustments because we do actually provide 2 affordable housing units. So there actually isn't a full 24 spaces that would be required. So it's somewhere between the 24 and the 14 is the number. So we do require a variance regardless because we will not have a sufficient amount of the parking as well. We started this process in July. We did receive a refusal letter on August 5th. We have submitted a petition or will submit a petition to the zoning board by September 15th. We are in the community process as well, butters meetings, neighborhood association, et cetera. And we have a similar timeline for a hearing before the ZBA, potentially winter 2022, design review and permit issuance. And then again, this would probably also take a year to complete, assuming we got our approvals. So with that, I think that's the last question, last comment. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Tony.
Sure, we had some questions that popped up in the chat. I saw that initially Gail Miller was asking, this is far outside of the 1 to 2 family zoning, hence no hardship here in this development. Please illuminate what perceived hardship is.
I would be happy to answer Gail's question on hardship, but Gail, I mean, when I propose projects that don't require variance, you oppose those as well. So I don't know that really is even relevant. Even if I could come up with a proposal that was by right, I don't know that you really would think that it's worthy of being approved. Hardship is a question that we need to address before the zoning board, and the zoning board members themselves would ask that question. I don't know that as part of a design review or part of a community process, which is intended to inform about the project itself, hardship is really the legal standard that we need to meet before the board, and that's, you know, our opportunity to make that argument when we get to the zoning board of appeal.
I beg to differ. If we're talking design review, appropriateness of a project, I find it hard to believe that that question cannot be answered and addressed in a design review, particularly if we're looking at a building that's tremendously oversized according to the zoning. So,
What about the building?
know,
Yeah, what about the buildings that are by right though, that you oppose? I mean, you
by
don't-
right,
You don't
I-
support those.
I don't think there are projects that are allowable by right, my reading of some of the materials. So let's not talk about something else. We're talking
No, I know,
about this.
well, no, I
That's a
mean,
distraction. So
it's
let's
not a
just talk about
distraction,
the
it's an honest
hardship.
question. I mean, you
No,
ask the
we're-
question all the
We're
time.
talking about this project. I don't want to discuss other projects. in the
Oh,
neighborhood.
okay, all right, understood.
No, I don't. No,
No, I
don't
know,
think
I
we-
understand.
I don't think we have to.
Good, perfect. So
For
I will
hardship.
need, I will need to address the, I will certainly need to address the hardship question when I get to the zoning board of appeal.
Well,
That was-
fine, that goes to the intent of the, like how concerned you are, I guess, about. the
Oh, no,
neighborhood.
I'm, Gail, don't get me wrong, I take my job very seriously. At this time, this
Well,
is
then you
initial,
should be, able.
well, this is an initial presentation and we are in
But
the
this is
process.
where we discuss those kinds
Can
of
I
issues.
speak, Gail? Can I answer the question? So we are in initial presentation. We're talking about the scope of the project. We're going to hear some feedback. We're going to likely make some modifications and adjustments to this project. And when I get to a point where I'm going to ask for a vote, I'll happily answer your question on hardship.
Well, Richard, I think you're not speaking to the intent of the design review committee. People that are coming here, volunteering their time, trying to preserve their neighborhoods. I think it's a fair question. It's a question that, City Councilor Michael Flaherty says it should be addressed. So I see no reason why it cannot be addressed here. You're going to the zoning board. People will go to the zoning board as well. So I don't see why it cannot be addressed here. That's the reason for variances.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the reason.
All right, well, there's no need of being hooty. Just
I'm not.
answer the question.
I don't have an answer at this time because I don't think we have a final design yet. When I get to a final design, I can give a more comprehensive answer on things like hardship and the purpose. And it's not just hardship, Gail. It's the purpose and intent of the code. It's the
And could you
let me
illuminate that,
finish.
please?
It's the purpose and intent of the code. It's the shape of the land. It's the topography of the land. There are a whole host of issues that go along with the question. It's not just hardship. Hardship is one factor that would be considered by the zoning board. And to make that determination, there's a collection of issues that have to be addressed. So when I get to a point where this project I feel is gone through the iterations that we feel are final, then I'm happy to answer those questions for you.
No, that in the process is way too late. That you should be addressing that up front, not after you spent your money.
Gail, if I
and the
gave
zoning
Gail,
board
if I
feels
gave
super
if I
good.
gave you the best answer on what the hardship is, I
Right.
have a strong suspicion that you aren't going to support it anyway. So I don't really know that matters at this point.
Well, no, it doesn't matter. This is a public discussion. It's zoned for one family. This is way above the zoning allowed. So, I mean, I find it hard to believe there's a hardship in the project.
Then
So, I mean,
that's
answer the
then
question.
you're entitled to your opinion, and then
That is
you can
not
take
my
that-
opinion.
and you can
That's
take
not
that
my opinion.
then you can take that position, and then when we go before the board, you can state that. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm not gonna convince you of a hardship when you're already predetermined that there is no hardship. So I don't know
All
what
right,
else. I
all
can
right.
say.
So address the answer to the abutters. They're sitting here on the call. They have a
I will happily address the answer on hardship when I have a final plan as to what we're gonna do. And this is an initial presentation to get feedback from neighbors. And, when I didn't have a petition filed with the Board of Appeal yet. So the question of hardship won't come up until I do that. So when I figure out what specifically we're gonna present to the board, I can better give you an answer on that hardship. That's all. That's my answer.
So this is just play then, because you're presenting something that that we're all talking about, but you said, well, this is not the final plan. So what are
It
we
never,
addressing here?
you,
That's the purpose of.
so
the-
Gail, if you just want to argue about the legality and the semantics of the zoning, then we're never going to satisfy you. So
No,
my-
I think it's a perfectly legitimate question, Rich. I mean, I don't know why it isn't. And you want to dance around the issue.
I'm
That's
not, nobody's,
fine.
listen, nobody's dancing.
Well-
I gave you my answer, Gil. If you just want to sit here and argue with me about hardship and zoning standards, then there's no purpose in me presenting anything then. Because at this point, we're never going to get to the questions or concerns over what the building itself looks like, or what we're trying to propose, or what matters most to people. No, we're going to argue about the legality and whether or not I can make a good case for hardship or not. That's really what you want. That's what you want me to do. That's what you want me to do, right?
I want, I would like you to answer.
And I would like you, when
Specific
I have an
questions.
as of right project, to say, you know what, we support it.
Well, this isn't an as of right project, so let's get that put aside.
Well,
However,
it's the
when
same,
you
it's the
go
same,
into
it's the
court-
same argument, Gail. You're asking me for something. now.
No, it's not, no. Listen, when you go to the Superior Court on an appeal, they're gonna look at what the current zoning is. And you know that, and I know that. So let's deal with what should be
Who's going
allowed
to, what are
on
we talking,
site.
why are we talking about Superior Court? I'm talking about a proposal we're making a first time presentation for, that
Because-
Tony, I understood we were gonna hear about feedback about the project, what the concerns are, things like
This is a
design,
concern.
things like height.
This
And
is a
Gail, we
concern.
can argue all night. I answered your question. I've answered
Well,
it.
No, you
You
haven't.
just don't like
so
the answer. I don't know if
no,
I can tell
no.
you.
You haven't answered it, sorry.
You don't like the answer. I did answer
Well,
it. You
well, how
just don't
about
like
other
it.
abutters? Other abutters.
And
would
I've
like
given
to
the
hear
answer. I said, we're here to listen to what the concerns are about the proposed project. Hardship, the question on hardship is a legal argument that the zoning board determines, not abutters. Abutters don't decide what the hardship is. That's the zoning board's job. That's my job to make the case to the zoning board. And if I don't do that, then I don't get my approval. But beyond that, I think we're wasting a lot of time here where people might want to have a little bit more input on, what do they think about the design? What do they think about the parking ratio? What do they think about the number of units? What do they think about the height? All of
Well,
those
I-
things are going to help me craft a better project, hopefully. And, like I always say, these are things that, the project has to work for the developer, it has to work for the neighborhood. And I'm trying to find out what that is. And to be
No,
honest with you, Gail, I thought that's what the purpose of this meeting was.
It is, and we have to address what zoning is too in the area, and it's only zoned for one family.
Thank
So
you.
now you want us to
Gail,
address-
Gail, you and
I'm
I
talking-
can debate it till the
I'm
cows come home.
talking. So this is a zone one family.
Correct.
And so we should be addressing a project that it has one family. But by having to address a project that's got 12 units, I mean, that's preposterous. So
Right, and you're
asking us
against
to-
it, and I understand that, Gail, and you're gonna vote no, and you're not gonna support it, and I get it. So let's move on to other people who have questions and
All right,
comments. I understand your
fine.
position, Gail. I understand it. It's clear.
Well, it's
Well,
not
we're-
clear. to-
We'll note the concern about the hardship. And hopefully we can move forward, discuss design review, talking points, and then come back next time with a more acceptable design that maybe doesn't need as many variances, and maybe at that point, you can easily explain the hardship.
Correct.
but
Thank you, Tony. I'm
if-
happy to do that, Tony.
If-
But to do it on the first meeting with, we haven't even heard the comments or concerns from neighbors. We can't even get into the question of hardship.
Brooke has had her hand raised for a while now, if she'd like to speak.
Thank you. My name is Brooke and I'm here with my family. We reside at 103 Faywood Ave, which is directly abutting this project to the rear. Here, I've looked at the plans and looked at this presentation, and in many ways, while you said that the developer is wanting to work on this closer, it looks like from the last proposal to this one, it's pretty much the same. And we opposed that one and we are opposing this one. It's too big for the lot. As you can see behind me, that building would tower over my house and my yard where my children play. It would totally take away any privacy that we enjoy and diminish the quality of our life. So like has been mentioned here before, we want the developer to follow the code. So it's zoned for a single family, and that's what would fit there. To put anything larger there, it would take away from what this neighborhood is and what attracted probably the developer's family to it in the beginning, which was that it is a quiet, family-oriented place that has ample green space and is not too densely crowded. We're already gonna get 10,000 new neighbors when Suffolk Downs development begins. The abutters to this area do not want this development. We fought the last one and we will fight this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just checking the chat here to see if there were any questions that cropped up that we missed. We actually had a question about the tandem spots a bit earlier. Sean Cronin had said, won't the tandem spots limit the number of units that have parking available, i.e. the 4 tandem would only make sense for 2 units or owned by the same units?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Sure. The question was, won't the tandem spots limit the number of units that have parking available, i.e. the 4 tandem would only make sense for 2 units or owned by the same units?
Yeah, so the tandem spaces could be assigned to a same unit. So there's only two units could have 2 spaces each. There are solutions, and we've seen them in other projects where tandem spaces work fine with other, especially in an enclosed garage. Tandem spaces work fine for owners of different units. There's a key share arrangement for moving the vehicles. That's something that's a possibility. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be assigned to one particular unit. So yeah, there's multiple options with the tandem spots.
It looks like we have a couple of hands raised. There's Patricia and Cindy Zumba.
Yes, hi, my name is Patricia, and I just want to say I am opposed to this building being built. This is a 1-family predominant street. That building is way too much, too big for us. It's very quiet here, and that is just going to destroy our quality of life as we have it right now. Thank you. So I am opposed.
Thank you.
Cindy, if you'd like to unmute, you should be able to.
Yes, hi, I'm Rita Bono, and I am a direct abutter in the rear as well as Brooke Machado. And my husband and I are most definitely opposed to it. Number one, our yard is, if you can see in this drawing, the rendition that they have here, the picture, our fence is right near the tree. Yeah, really, I mean, it's my husband saying it's over.
It's over. The thing
And
is a joke.
it will have no privacy at all. And my son is autistic.
They have
And
a
he
building.
enjoys going. That's why we bought a house 40 some odd years ago, to have privacy, because this was a single family homes. You were it was like a suburb, and yet you were still in the city. And we're all, and now we can't even go out and look in our yard. If we'll see a building, we won't be able to see. My son enjoys.
People doing whatever they want.
Yeah, I mean, our autistic son, he's already enclosed in his own world. But when he goes in the yard, he can watch the squirrels jump from tree to tree. He watches the birds. He has a binocular.
Destroyed the economy.
He enjoys it. And now our life, as we have known for 40, 50, it's 45 years we've been here, is now going to be, completely destroyed, because all they want to do is keep building and building and building. And I don't understand, Mr. Linz, I don't know where you live, but let's say, I heard you may live in Linfield. I would like to know, how would you feel? What would you say if you were at this meeting and it was you opposing this proposal? What would you say about having a condo being developed in your own backyard? What would you say? Because maybe that's what I will say.
So first of all, and with
Yeah.
with all due respect, you know,
Yeah.
to your point, I understand what you're saying. I'm here as an advocate, as an attorney. My job's an attorney. I don't have a vested interest in the outcome. I get hired to represent clients before board. So, you know, my address or where I live, where I lay my head, or where I work, or wherever I do, I don't know is really relevant to the conversation. But and the reason I say that is because if I said to you, I would have no problem with it, that wouldn't change your mind, would it?
No.
Okay, it
Well-
wouldn't. So it's not relevant where I live, because my job
it
as an
isn't.
attorney, no, it's not, because my job as an attorney is to represent my clients, and it's unfair to say that, you know,
But
because
your
I don't
job
have.
as an
you don't-
attorney is to represent your client and just walk over people.
No,
just
no,
because
I
this is
don't,
what-
no, that's
Yeah, this is what
not,
you-
that's not
Basically,
what,
are you just a
I'm
nice
sorry,
guy?
that's not what I do.
Are you just a nice guy that you're saying, oh, well, I'm gonna represent my attorney, I'm gonna represent my client, and we can do whatever we want, we can build
Who
as
said
high
that?
as we want.
Nobody,
you're
nobody,
saying
said-
this is what
nobody said we
you're-
can do whatever we want, because there's a
Well-
process that's involved. I have to go through a process. I have to request approvals. There's no, in my job, in the profession I chose is to be an attorney, and that's what I do. So to
Well,
make it personal about me is not fair. And it's not a fair
Well, I'm
process.
sorry. It's not fair on me as well.
Well, but
It's
I'm not.
fair
but
on me, it's not fair on any of the abutters, it's
I'm
not fair
doing-
in this neighborhood.
Yeah,
How is it fair?
Tony,
How do you sleep
again,
at
I don't understand the function of a design review meeting. If we're gonna just, you know, have ad hominem attacks against
Well,
me
I mean,
as an
as I-
attorney, you know, my
Yeah,
job is to
that's-
represent
Yeah,
my
you used
client.
to live right next door in Winthrop, I know
It
you.
doesn't, you know,
I know
thank you
you.
for pointing out where I live and all the,
Yes.
that's wonderful that you think that's relevant, but it has nothing to do with whether or not this is a good or a bad project. And if I
It's a
said,
bad project.
excuse me,
that's-
if I said to you that, yes, I would welcome this in my neighborhood, that's not gonna change your mind, is it? You're still not gonna like this project, are you?
Yeah, no, I would like to hear you
No, you
say.
wouldn't. You
Yeah,
wouldn't.
if you said you would agree with that, I would like
Sure.
to hear your
Okay.
points as to why you would agree
Yeah,
with it.
but
Maybe you
my
could-
point is that it doesn't weigh in on your decision. So therefore,
No,
it's
you're
I'm
wrong.
sorry.
You're absolutely wrong, because.
It's
if you
irrelevant.
give
Yes,
me
no, I'm
good
not. It's
points-
irrelevant to the
You're talking over
conversation.
me, Richie Lindsay.
No, I know, but you can't say things to me that you feel like because where I live, if I would accept this, that somehow that matters. So it doesn't.
Well, it would, because I'm asking you, how would
You're
you,
not gonna.
what would you say to the developer?
Excuse
What
me,
would
ma'am.
you say to the
You're
attorney?
in, I respect your position. You don't like the project. You've made your point. You've told me how you feel about this.
And how do you?
And I'm trying to listen to that, but you want to
No, you're not.
attack me on it? I mean, I don't know what else to say to you.
Well,
Tony, can we
because
move on
it
to the next
angers me.
question?
I can feel, I can be angry, and I intend to be angry, and I intend to be an angry and, you know, telling people how I feel about having single family homes that we've been here for 45 years, and now we have to have these condos, these monstrosities that are gonna be erected in my backyard, literally. And the people next door that this guy, I watched him for 2 years making a beautiful yard for his children to enjoy. They can go out, they can go skinny, they can do what they want because it's their own privacy. Not anymore. And who knows, God knows who's gonna be renting these places or buying these places. And that's all. But I don't like the design. It's much too high, and I don't see the last monstrosity that Mr. What was his name? Belcucci wanted to do was pretty much the same. It looks a little different in the front. It's set back 10 feet, but it's a monster in the back. with little
And
porches
you know what?
everywhere.
And guess what? That's okay to tell me that, and that's the purpose of these meetings.
I
But-
agree. I
But
know.
right, so to get mad at me for doing my job, I'm sorry. That's
Well,
not.
I'm
that's
sorry
just-
too.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that's not what I came here for. I came to have a conversation about the project. I'm doing my job.
Well, you better be prepared, because when the abutters meeting comes, we're gonna be saying that, and you're gonna have to give us some good answers, Richie.
Yeah. Yeah, but where I live and where I raise my family is
All right, so,
nothing to do.
all right,
nothing to
I
do with
understand that, but I'm certainly not gonna apologize for it, because you are still, you're still
You don't have
representing
to,
the
look at it,
client.
you don't have to apologize. Don't worry about it. But I'm gonna tell you that it has nothing to do.
accept it
with the
anyway.
project.
No, you wouldn't, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the purpose of that was just trying to see if you were in my shoes or to paint a better picture.
Right.
and
Tony,
not-
that's
like digging into-
completely inappropriate. I'm an attorney representing a
Oh,
client.
always.
I doesn't have to
always
be in their
inappropriate.
shoes.
Not
You know what,
inappropriate.
Tony, guess what, Tony? I think this process is so disorganized right now. Why don't we focus on, we've not talked one thing about other than people just don't like the project. I get that. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about
So
some
why
different.
go further? Who likes it?
You know
I
what?
haven't
You're
had one
right.
person say that they
Guess
like
what?
it.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Why go
No,
further?
I don't mean.
Tony, any other
yeah,
questions?
right.
Diane has
got
had
somebody that
her
likes it.
hand raised. If she would like to make a comment, and I have been making notes on the things like the fact that it's not a single family. Some people were saying kudos to Eric on the design, but it's too big. And that they would approve of it if it was smaller. So I do have some things noted here. But if Diane, you would like to speak.
Hi, I'm Diane DiGiacomo. I'm at 124 Waldemar, 2 doors down. I've known this family for 60 years. I'm not opposed to for them to be making money because that's what the name of the game is. I want to commend the design to the architect who thought out of the box for once and not put up a box, want to put up a box that looks like a housing project. But the concern of all of us is the size. If you come down half the size, I don't know, I don't want to speak for anybody, but if it comes down, it'll get approved, I'm sure. You can't suffocate the neighborhood. You can't, it's not fair to the people behind them. It's just not fair. And Richie, I want to say one thing. I understand you're an attorney, and I know attorneys, but the setting of this meeting, number one, should be in person. Number two, it's not being defensive. I mean, we should be able to communicate our feelings and how we feel as abutters. So I just want to say that. And,
Mr. Giacomo, I have no problem. I do this for a living. I have no problem with people
I know
communicating. I have no problem with people communicating their feelings. That's what I'm here for. It's not should be personal against me.
No, I understand that, but, the way you were talking to Gail Miller, I mean, that was unacceptable. That's just my opinion. But I think if you want to work with the abutters, you got to come back with something smaller. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak about it, but, that's, nobody wants a monstrosity when we're getting Suffolk Downs with all those units and on Crestway. I mean, we live here, Everybody always talked about East Boston, a drug haven, this and that. Now people are prospering millions and millions off of our city. So people will work with you, but you have to work with the people. That's it.
Ms. DiGiacomo, thank you for your comments. And yes, I that's exactly what I'm trying to do. That's why I put this presentation together. I didn't pick the forum. This is done by the Orient Heights Neighborhood Council. So I don't decide whether it's in person or virtual. That's up to them. And again, I come here to present the project. I fully understand people are going to have concerns over it, and I'm happy to respond to that as I did with the last project. I'm not here to be defensive, but I don't really think it's appropriate for people to start questioning, my personal motives when everybody understands why I'm here. I'm here to represent a client. That's what I do for a living. And what I do in my personal life really has nothing to do with this.
Richie, but you have to realize that we, the people here, people, you guys, went to Melrose, Linfield or whatever, and I know you're doing your job, but let's face it, nobody would want these monstrosities next door. Nobody. And you have to do your job. I understand the whole process, but you have to have a little compassion for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Sean has his hand raised.
Thank you.
Like to speak.
Sure. Richie, I have a question for you, and maybe this will help with maybe some of the animosity that I'm hearing in the chat. How familiar are you with the prior project that was went up here? Because from what I understand, a lot, we just moved in. We're the abutters at 108 Waldemar. A lot has already gone into opposing a project of this size there. So I guess my question is, how familiar are with it? And it, at least on its face, it doesn't seem very different. And if there's more to it that you want to explain as to how this 3-story building is significantly different than the I think it was a 3-story building they were building before, I'd like to hear how you've addressed those concerns.
Yeah, I wasn't involved with the last project. That was a different attorney, a different developer. I'm not really even, I don't know that I even have seen the most recent iteration of that. What I did do when I was contacted by Jean, when she expressed what the issues were in the last go around, suggested that it would make good sense to have an architect who, has the ability to capture some of the precedent in the neighborhood to try to do something that's a little more contextual. And that's why I suggested Eric Zackerson. I think he does a good job. I'm not saying this is a perfect final version of what we would like to do here. This is an expression of an idea of how we might start to move the process forward. By no means do I expect this to be the final conversation on this. And I try to make that clear to people in all of my presentations that, this is an initial beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. So I'm happy to continue having that dialogue. I've done many projects in this neighborhood where we've come to good solutions and good resolutions with abutters, and to get something that works for everybody. I hear the concerns from abutters in the rear. I hear the concerns of abutters on the street, and they don't fall on deaf ears. I take these back to my client, and I have a very candid conversation to say, these are the things that we need to look at if this is going to, have any possibility of moving forward. And that's really what the purpose of what I understand the purpose of this meeting is tonight, to try to work towards something that people, can be agreeable to. The issues that came up earlier about what's the hardship, that's a great academic conversation. But at the end of the day, whether there's a hardship, no hardship, I make a good case for hardship, I don't make a good case for hardship. There's a 7-member board that may vote to approve this. There's a 7-member board that may vote to deny this. And my job, at least if I'm doing it correctly, is to get something that not only works for my client, but has the support of the neighborhood, so that we aren't in a constant struggle or with these, with constant animosity. So that's why I'm asking, what is it about the project that works for people? And what is it about the project that doesn't work? And let us see if we can come up with something that can become the compromise. It is, Gail's right. I mean, yeah, it's the hardship is the standard. But if anybody understands the way Boston zoning works and the zoning board, because it's one of Gail's chief criticisms, is that the board grants variances, and they do so regularly, and they do so sometimes without meeting the standard of hardship. And the only recourse at that point is an abutter appeal. And if that is something that, makes more sense for people, then so be it. But wouldn't it be better if we come up with a project that everybody sort of feels works for them or addresses their concerns? And that's why we have this community process. I think that, again, having academic discussions about the legal standard of a variance isn't going to solve the problems that come up when we say, okay, well, if nobody wants to give us input on the project and we take this to the board and the board approves it, then we've got a project that nobody really had much say on, do we? So,
well, Rich, I mean, take the the hardship aspect out of it, and what you are hearing is in the design itself. I mean, as an abutter, it's the size. You're going to be 3 stories over my 1-story property with 3 balconies facing my backyard. That's a problem. On the back side of it, for everyone on that hill, you're looking into their backyards, which they haven't had, and they really should have no reason to expect that there would be a property that big in this neighborhood. Right. I mean, so take the legal part out of it, and that is focused on the design. And they are telling you that we don't want a property that large right next to us. And you have a 1-foot setback on my side of the property. Like a 1 foot, like what I mean, that you're basically building it in my back bedroom. I mean, come on.
Are you left to the left or to the right?
If you're looking at it from the street, we're to the left. We're 1 away.
More, I mean, it's 1 foot from our property line, but there's the easement in between both parcels. So it's actually so the intent of the code is to have 10 feet between the property line and the structure. So I don't know how far your structure is from your property line, but we would be, I think, I gotta call up the site plan, but I believe we're probably at what the code requires. But be that as it may, and again, I understand the arguments about the standards for variances. I was a zoning board chairman for 5 years. I get the standard of hardship. What I'm saying is that we have a project that we're intending to proceed with, and all too often, and this has been a frustration not only for, I think, abutters, but it's frustration of developers, it's frustration of lawyers, frustration of architects, is that these meetings present an opportunity to come up with something, and I'm hearing, I'm listening, I'm not ignoring people. Presents an opportunity for people to give us the feedback so that we can try to improve where we're at and get to a place that people can be comfortable with a project. And I'm not saying it's going to be perfect for my client. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect for everybody, but it's going to be a lot better than this is what we want to do and we're not changing it. And we're going to, throw the dice down the board. And if we get it approved, this is what we're building. I mean, I think it makes a lot more sense to try to come to some compromise on certain issues and address these things. And that's what I'm aiming for. I'm not aiming to be confrontational.
I guess my struggle is, and this is one of the things that we aren't seeing designed here, as somebody who just purchased a single family home in East Boston and the price that was associated with it, we purchased here because it was a neighborhood structure and that all up and down our street is single families. Now you want to put a large development next door. I mean, there seems to be value in developing it to code. I know firsthand as what my mortgage payment is right now compared to what it would have been when this place was developed. Like, there's value there, and we don't have a plan that looks anything like what's going on in the neighborhood, and that is the chief concern.
Right. No, I understand it, and the criticism of the zoning board is something that is real, and people feel that the board is pretty loose in granting variances. I disagree. I don't think they are. I think that there are a lot of good projects that have been vetted in neighborhoods and that that work very well, even though they've required some zoning relief. If you just will only approve projects that are by right, you're not going to have anything done in the city, and that's just going to be unrealistic. So again, I'm not saying that this is the end all be all part of the discussion, but we are looking to hear about things like what is the concern. You just raised the concern. You said it's going to be within 1 foot of your property. I mean, that's a concern that I have to take back to my clients. Like, these are things that we're hearing in the neighborhood. These are things that we have to look at and figure out how we might address that.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think that there are concerns about design, and it does boil down to its size, and that includes the balconies, the height, that includes the setbacks. And you've heard that. I just don't want you to be. It's clear that you have had disagreements with it in the past, but like, there are concerns for the people who haven't been in the part of that process as well, that I think that we deserve the answer. So, and we'll continue that discussion. I just, I think that there's a pretty big consensus here that that the abutters are not a fan of this multifamily, large structure, as opposed to the zone smaller single family that it is.
I understand that. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your civility in the comments and how you deliver them. So, I mean, I'm happy to continue the dialogue and see what we can do to try to come up with something that's better, that works better for the site.
We had additional comments in the chat pertaining to, again, the size of the multifamily. There was another question, why not just build to code? But I think that's the same idea there. On Gail's note about the if you build a one family, if you bought a one family and demolished it, I know that's something that like Lydia Edwards is working on. I know like some of the mayoral candidates are talking about it. So I know that's not something that's just disappeared from people's minds. If anyone else has any comments, I know people still have their hands raised, but I think those are just are lingering. I did capture notes this far on the feedback that people had. And I'll organize all of that and give it over to you, Rich, so that you're able to bring it to your developer and give them the feedback.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that.
Of course. I don't see anybody else popping up with questions. So I think that'll probably be it for this meeting. If anyone has any additional feedback that wasn't discussed, if you want to email it to the OHNC@gmail.com, I can send that over to Rich, or Rich's email was also in the agenda. If you'd like to do that directly to give like feedback from the abutters. Does that sound good to everyone? And Rich, would you like to come back on October 7th? Same time at 6 p.m.?
Sure.
Okay, and then we'll discuss the same design-oriented talking points that we had today.
Yeah, and again, in the same vein as the last meeting, I mean, my experience when we do subcommittee type meetings for civic groups is that, we narrow the issues and we focus on those issues rather than just being, a free-for-all discussion that really doesn't focus on specifics. So I'm happy to address specific issues if we want to try to narrow what those are. And I'll try to work on that, in advance of the 7th. And I mean, preferably I would have that information, at least 2 weeks before. So if there's any design changes we need to incorporate, we can do that accordingly.
Sure, I'll get everything over to you probably by like tomorrow afternoon, just in case anybody emails in any additional feedback. And then if you have everything prepared in advance, we can also send that out to people. That way they have it, they come to the meeting prepared, and we can just roll through all of the concerns that people have that you've already, been over and discussed with your client.
Yeah, I noticed in the chat, and I just want to point it out because I don't know what the suggestion is. Larry Zoller says that there was a group that were just doing their job in World War II. I don't know what what's that in reference to. Are you talking about our armed forces, or are you talking about somebody else, Larry? I don't understand the point you were trying to make. If he's still on.
I think he's still on. He had made a comment right before that about the appearance of the building, saying it looked like an institution and not a home.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that was related.
I think he was responding to when I said I'm doing my job. He says there was a group that was doing their job in World War II. I don't know what the suggestion is. I would hope, Larry, for the sake of conversation, that you're not suggesting somehow that that's akin to a certain group that was involved in the Holocaust. I would take very specific offense to that if that's your suggestion.
Yeah, I would hope not. It's not how I initially read it. I was assuming that it was related to the comp before that. But I don't believe we would associate you with those sorts of things.
Thank you.
So with that, have a wonderful evening. I will get you a list of bulleted points of the stuff that we discussed tonight. And we'll see you again in October.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.